Hello, IT pros. This is Michael Askins with ITPro, and today we have the much awaited for conversation with. Everyone knows these are my favorite to do, and we have a special guest with us today, the CEO of Aspirant, Mike McClaine. How you doing today, Mike?
Hey, Michael, great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I know I've had the last several, I have had some Aspirant folks on. I had Dean Campbell and Erica. And as everyone knows, I always say on all of my shows, the day job, and I always preface it that the day job is Aspirant. So we really love to, get the messaging out for Aspirant and all the goodness that comes along with that. That being said, being the CEO of an organization that focuses on management and technology consulting, I'm sure that is there's some disparate types of personalities potentially between the two types of people. And I'm hoping to dive into a little bit of that today. But first, let's start off for those who may not be familiar. Tell me a little bit about Aspirant. Well, let's converse about Aspirant and what Aspirant can do for businesses, but more importantly, the impact it's making to business and IT organizations.
All right, that sounds great, Michael. Yeah, from an overall standpoint, I think now's an interesting time in consulting. It's very intense. It's a very intense business to be in, and I think due to the pandemic, the transition to virtual, there's all kinds of needs for consulting. Whether it's a company that is doing great in this environment and needs help keeping up with all the demands of their job or of their company, or it's a company that's struggling in this situation, maybe they need restructuring help or support. Not to mention all those companies that are looking to get to their company to the cloud or acquire all the talent they need. Regardless, it's a real transitional time for the whole environment, the whole business environment right now. So consulting is extremely important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And when people are trying to do things that are, smarter with their business dollars, sometimes it makes sense to have, a team. I like to say the phrase SWAT, almost like a SWAT team, SWAT
Yeah.
in, kind of help them where they need it and then leave them with a sustainable path forward and SWAT out. Are you seeing that that's across most of the offerings? Because as I mentioned, there's management consulting and then there's also technology consulting. The management consulting side, organizational effectiveness and HR and all the goodness that they provide. I'm sure, especially with all the realignment, you're seeing an uptick on in those verticals as well.
We absolutely are. And your comment about getting in and getting back out, I think companies want that now. We've noticed that post-pandemic, companies are often looking for more efficient projects, get things done quickly. They want results, not just PowerPoint presentations, not just very high-level plans. They want to get things done in a short amount of time, and they want it for a reasonable price. And interestingly, that is right in the wheelhouse of Aspirant, and is actually one of the reasons that through the pandemic, our business has grown dramatically. I think that's only going to continue. People want the value. It's no longer enough to just provide the name of a big consultant and say, well, we're the one to help you. People want to know exactly what you're going to accomplish and how you're going to do it.
Yeah, and it makes sense. We have to be wiser with our actions, and we want to, from a technology perspective, sitting on top of the cloud in that area. One of the things that is often asked of us is like, what is the deliverable? And you had mentioned the deliverables of here's a PowerPoint. One of the things that we see day to day is the deliverables, not just here's what you should do. It's okay, and here's the thing we built, and here's how you maintain it, and here's what you need to do to make it sustainable and moving forward. And I found, full transparency to the listeners who may not know this, when I joined up with Aspirant, one of the reasons I did was because the philosophies matched so close.
Yeah.
We had very similar approaches and mindset in the way we need to engage with businesses. So that made it very, very easy choice to do that. And we've seen, massive success and growth in that space, and driving that for customers.
Right.
if there is an area in that is, as the dust settles, if you will, and the world starts going back to normal as normal can be, what is
Right.
the biggest focus when it comes to engaging with consultants that you're seeing? Are you seeing it just across the board, full need? You mentioned earlier there's all kinds of need. Are there unique things that you found out of this that were areas you didn't expect?
I don't know that there were, I don't know that it was areas I didn't expect. It's just the focus of those areas. So if you think, everybody knows diversity and inclusion is a huge element right now. There's every company out there's looking at those kind of programs. But when you think of companies trying to get their software to a cloud environment. Once again, not surprising. It's more the level of it, the intensity of it. Same thing with, okay, now my company is more virtual. Is my organization still fit for purpose? Do I have the right roles? Do I have the right position? So we're seeing a lot of pickup in that area as well. So once again, I think it's not so much a surprise what the things are. It's just the level, the volume of requirement in this current market. And the other thing I would position back to you on your earlier comment, I think going into clients, I think the reality is much of the time they already know what they need to do. They already know the concepts, they know what's important, they know their business better than any consultant does. So by being the consultant that comes in there and says, okay, here's our approach, we're going to use these ratios, we're going to get these things done, we're going to put in this software, it doesn't work. Getting in there, really understanding, listening, being humble about the way you do things, listening to what they truly need, and then crafting a solution that meets their objectives. And when you talked about having similar approaches, I think that's what you were talking. Those are the kind of things you were talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you and I have spoken in the past. One of the things that I had said kind of just in passing to a customer when we're trying to figure out an engagement, we were trying to figure out like how we're going to accomplish it. And I said, well, you have smart people and we have smart people. Let's just put them in a room together and what comes out is going to be
Yeah.
good. Right. And that's the one big, one of the key things that I've been focusing on, recent with these conversations is understanding, leadership and people and that mindset of the difference between technologists in the business and how to bridge that gap. I think it's more one of the things that needs to be a focus. I think moving forward for all organizations, those listening far and wide is, have an ear open and be understanding and not provincial, because that's, provincialism builds walls and boundaries. And whether it's with a consulting company or an internal team, boundaries are not effective, right? You can put guardrails up to make sure people are doing things within their lane, but open collaboration
Yeah.
is much more effective, right?
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And it really it's not like we set out to intentionally do this, but the reality is it's turned out to be a big selling point of our services. We have all of these practices ranging from marketing to organizational effectiveness to mergers and acquisitions, your cloud practice, applications, development and integration, et cetera. They don't operate as silos. And when you see, and sometimes in the bigger companies where they do, you get a solution, it meets your specific need, but it's not the best solution. So if you can bring solutions to bear that bring marketing thought, OE, or change management thought, you can talk about how we're going to put a system in place, the benefits it's going to have, but now how are we going to make sure it gets adopted? How are we going to make sure it gets embedded? How do we market that to people? I think that has really turned into a big advantage for us in the way we do things. I think it's also turned into a big advantage from a recruiting standpoint, but because consultants, especially early in their career, they love the fact that many of us became consultants because we like to try a lot of different things, like to do a lot of different things. So if you're not pigeonholed and you have the opportunity to contribute across the board, I think it makes it a lot more fun job too.
Yeah, and it might take your career in places that you never thought it would. Part of the goal of ITP, aside from, the charitable things that I do with it, is to try to like make IT professionals better. And then I was like, no, it's ITM business professionals better. And I
Yeah.
made this one person that had worked for me in the past was a hardcore modern workplace 365 person, and I really needed someone to like pick up a meeting. And I said, hey, this is an Azure meeting, and I want you to go to it. And they're like, I don't want to do that. And here, 8 years later, this particular person is like a premier Azure architect and has never looked back. And like we
Right.
sync up now and again. And we had the statement, over the pandemic, we had a virtual, happy hour, and he was like, I never would have been thought I would never would have if you wouldn't have forced that. I was like, well, that's part of consulting, is like having the ability to be exposed to things. Now, I'm looking at it through a technology lens.
Right.
But even across, like between the HR services and OE, and other consulting areas, having that ability to do that is awesome. You mentioned practices that would not typically in other organizations work together. And we have in the cloud space, I had a realization just today, and this is like farm fresh brain synapse.
All
So like
right.
it's not well formed, but it's going to come out of my mouth
I'm ready.
anyway. You ready?
Yeah.
So the very first project when we merged in with Aspirant was working for a healthcare company developing a microsite. um, One of our customers that we have, that we brought in with us they do health sciences, and they also do other consumer products. And recently they asked us, they're going to have a new product launch, and they're like, we need a microsite. And for some reason they asked me, just like, who would do that? And I was like, well, we do that. And then I was on a call internally with some colleagues, and they're like, they're in the pharmaceutical realm, and they're like, oh yeah, there's this new product launch. I was like, have you thought of a microsite? Historically with IT consulting, it's like always big bang, right? We're going to do this big migration and move your stuff to
Yeah.
SharePoint. And we often forget to put the lens on of, well, there's all these maybe smaller, but they may seem transactional, but they're impactful to an organization to be able to
Right.
roll in there. And for the life of me, I never thought I'd be like working with a marketing department to go to market with, like, hey, this is how we can handle those products. Yet here we are today having a conference call to figure out a good way to approach that. So it's a testament of being able to work across the aisle, if you will.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, especially for those of you out there who are maybe considering going into business yourself or starting your own consulting company, it's especially valuable when you first start, because that mentality, I mean, you're fighting and clawing for any business you can get as your company begins to grow. You have to be flexible. And if you're not going to get the business if you're saying, I only do this one thing. And sometimes your business morphs into a different thing than you first thought it would, just like, the example you gave for that
Yeah.
individual.
Yeah, for sure. Microsoft, not turning this into the tech podcast, but Microsoft, that won one of the partner conferences many years ago, they made a statement that kind of made all the consulting companies, like, their hackles were up. They were all turned and all in a tither, because Microsoft said, if you want to be a partner, be good at and do one thing,
Mhm.
and then you'll get recognized. I was like, well, you could be good and do one thing and get recognized at it. Sure, you don't want to boil the ocean and do everything. You certainly
Yeah.
don't want to do things you're not capable of doing, but being able to diversify enough to satisfy the customer, that is the approach. And they've since adopted that change. But it's interesting to see when I put on my technology lenses on, then I put my business lenses on, and see how similar they are. And there's a lot of things that are very similar. I know some organizations get either intimidated, or they just don't want to understand the technology side, because we're just full of acronyms. You put a technologist on the line, they're just going to spout acronyms, and you're going to say, okay, well, that's not how the world is. We work together now. We explain things, and we try to collaborate. Do you see there's the divide between business and IT getting narrower? What are your thoughts around what that looks like from your experiences out there?
Well, first of all, and you're well aware of it, we've seen over the past 10 to 15 years how the especially with the advent of the concept of digital transformation has come into play. You're seeing often digital roles, digital leadership roles that are separate from IT leadership roles. And what that's telling us is all of the technology changes that are being made need to be driven by business reason. There needs to be a value proposition. We can't make changes just to make changes. And I think the whole, the market has learned that over the past 10 to 15 years and has really gone more towards that. I think at a different level, thinking through whether you're in IT consulting and you know about a specific type of architecture or programming or et cetera, or let's say you're a marketing consultant and you understand the details of advertising and market research and brand planning. There's base core competencies that you need to have to do your job, but there's something above all of it that is the essence of consulting, which is truly understanding a client need, helping solve problems, helping them get to where they need to go. That is a requirement of no matter what kind of consulting you do. When people ask me, what makes a good consultant, my stock answer is always the best consultant is someone who can take chaos and turn it into order.
Yep.
And that does not matter whether it's IT or marketing or organizational change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The one thing I found is like when I made hay in the consulting world, and I've been in and out of consulting and enterprise, and the one thing that I found that allowed me to get, I'll just put it this way, career acceleration, is that I wasn't afraid. And that's one of the things that you see often is, in some larger organizations, they're tactically careful as opposed to
Yeah.
tactically productive. And I wasn't afraid to, make the right choice or just to choose. And, that's one of the skills I look for when I'm looking to add to the team is finding people that are, have the aptitude to do the work, but also are, decisive enough to make a call. Do you see that in the other lines of consulting too, as well?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. And you were talking about career pathing and where you want to go. I think there's something about being confident and taking that next step and putting yourself out there when you inside aren't totally confident. The story of consulting 30 years ago used to be, you work for a big consultant, you get a manual, you get on a plane, and when you get off of the plane, you're the expert and you're going and telling the client,
So true.
how they need to run this system. There is an element of self-confidence and certainty that even though that you don't know the solution yet, that you're going to, but by the time things are finished.
Yep.
And having that trait enables you to take on new roles, apply for new positions, to say yes when people ask you about opportunities instead of no, I'm not really sure I'm competent enough in my current role, I'm not ready for that yet. Being willing to put yourself out there is huge.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I agree with that. I'm gonna give you a little story from my history, my background. Back when I used to do structural engineering, we represented some software companies that did, and I used to do structural engineering stuff. And I was thrown this package that was a kinematics package that coupled movement with physics, and so I had 14 hours to learn this package that I never heard of for the life of me. I had 14 hours to learn it, and then I was presenting in front of 500 people in an auditorium the very
Yeah.
next day. And so it's like there's some people have that ability to be able to dig in and just figure it out, and then have that confidence behind them. And others, have struggled or worked with it. Which is going to segue into kind of my next question. It's a little bit along the same tone of some of the other shows I've pushed out there. Is what are some of the skills that you touched on it already a little bit, but what are the top skills that not just make a good consultant, but make someone who's competent, who understands what the customer needs, and that can be that rock star when it comes time for deliverables? There's got to be a core set of principles or skills or abilities
Yeah.
that you feel that wrapper that. So kind of going off what you mentioned
Yeah.
already, what else in that lane?
Yeah. First of all, it is having that core competency, because if you don't have something that you're really good at that you can share, it makes it difficult to to truly be successful. Then I would talk about, on top of that, that problem solving capability, the willingness to put yourself out there and go try new things, to be curious. So those things absolutely apply. Um, on top of it, there's things, to be a truly good consultant, it's not about just doing projects. It's about helping develop your next opportunity. So that confidence in talking to people about, oh, I heard this is going on at your organization. Might that be an opportunity for another project? Or how can I help you with this? Developing those relationships is really important. So I think there are some things that separate which way you go in your career. There's people that they start out in a technical role and they just stay a technical role, and they don't want to be doing that business development or talking to a lot of people. They just want, have a certain mindset. They want to just deliver great results, and that's okay. And recognizing that is your passion is really important. But for others who want to develop in a different direction, that relationship side, the ability to have conversations, and I'll tell you what, listening is one of the critical skills, no matter what role you end up in.
Yeah, I made the statement on the recording I did with Dean Campbell and I'm a firm believer of this, is the smartest person is in the room isn't always the one who's talking.
Right.
Sometimes it is, especially if it's a presentations, but a lot of the times if it's a collaborative, because, someone who's going to, sit there and absorb all the data points as opposed to just reacting. And that's especially in the technical realm, we feel the urge. I'm saying we as technologists tend to feel the urge to want to have an answer for people like right away. And that says, hey, look, I have this answer for you, as
Yeah.
opposed to absorbing. Like there's so many times I heard answers just spat out, and all of a sudden these other data points come, are like, oh, that would have
Yeah.
been good.
Yeah, I think the opposite's also true, which is sometimes someone will ask you, well, how much is it going to take to do this project? How long do you think it will take to implement this software? And the answer comes back, well, I can't tell you. I'd have to look at all these different things. There's so many factors. And the person on the other side just wants a ballpark idea
Yeah.
that is, just tell me about, I'm not going to hold you to it, but about how long will that take? About how much will that cost? Some people will never get comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And that is something, it's also a separator, being able to transition between the high level and the detail and being confident in it. You might not know all 83 steps to get to the conclusion, but you've seen projects like that before.
Yep.
You've done it, you have an idea. And that's a valuable capability from a client standpoint.
Yeah, one of the things that I do often is the name escapes me right now. I say it all the time, and of course, when we're recording here, it escapes me. But when you're trying to figure out when something will be done or a level of effort, you take your gut, what you think it is, plus what the longest time it will be, plus the shortest time divided by 6. Like there's this like formula for estimating that. It's some methodology. And like anytime I'm like on a customer call, I'm like adding numbers up mentally and trying to, because I know undoubtedly they're going to be like, well, how much do you think? And you want to be as close, you want to be in the realm, in the ballpark anyways, right?
I think so. I've never formalized it like that, but I would be interested here. Maybe you can tell that on a future show.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, I have a little OneNote notebook with it. I try to share it with all my team members, like try to learn this. And everyone is like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. A lot of mental math,
Sure.
Has there ever been a particular person in your career, your whole career, it could be anything from your first part-time job all the way till now, that was influential to get you to your seat today?
Yeah, I think the person I would mention is Colin McKenzie. Colin was president of consumer healthcare for the Americas at GSK when I was last there. That was my job before I came to Aspirant. And he really honed in my ability to communicate succinctly. He is a very straightforward communicator. wanted to have things presented in a way that it was A, therefore B, therefore C. And when things didn't match up to that, and when I would think, oh, you would just understand this, he would say, I don't get it. And which meant go make it simpler. So really learned that from him, simple communication style, but then also investing as you invest, as you try to grow a company, don't invest in 100 different things. We can all do anything we want, but we can't do everything we want. So you have to choose the 1, 2, 3 things that will make the most impact and really focus on those. So start with number one, make sure you are absolutely able to deliver it, and then go on to number two. So many times companies try 100 different things and scattershot. And frankly, that's an issue that I have, because I like you, same as you, Michael, like to get into different things. I'm curious about different things. So really bringing it back to, let's focus on what's really important. Both the communication and the prioritization were key things that came from Colin.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. And again, we share that, and it's so hard with cloud, especially in tech. It's so
Yeah.
easy to see something sparkly over in the corner and chase it, right? Or read an article like all these big companies are doing this specific
Yeah.
technology thing and be like, yeah, we got to do that too. Well, you might be able to speak to it. You might even be able to sell it, but you also have to be the expert and deliver it. And, I think reputation is huge. And I think that's the one thing that we do well at Aspirant, is making sure that we stand behind what we can do, and we do well at what we know. So that's definitely a huge attractor for not only employees coming to there, but it's our customers alike. The repeat customers are like incredible. I mean, I've worked at many consulting companies, and when you look at the turnover, or the churn, as Microsoft calls it, the churn is like huge, because people are just like opportunistically grabbing projects as opposed to strategically partnering with their clients. Which is
Yeah.
going to lead me. Sorry, go ahead. Did you have a?
No, I was going to say, if you combine those two things, which is that comfort and saying, hey, I don't know all about this yet, but I'm confident I can get it done, with that need to get things great every time. Have you had situations where that conflict got you into trouble at all, and you ended up, oh my gosh, how am I going to deliver this?
Yes, it actually has. And a lot of it has to do with my personal history. The way I'm wired is, I think, different than most people, because I can understand technology innately for some reason. It's just the way I'm built. I can adopt and get clarity and deploy relatively rapidly. So it's easy for me to go out and say, hey, you can do this, and here's an architecture for you. And it's also easy to say, this is what it'll cost you. But then, in the consulting world, once pen's the paper and I turn to hand it off to someone, in the past, that has really bit me in the rear end. So now, one of the things is that I do with my team members is making sure that the technologies that I want to talk and evangelize about, that they have familiarity with, so much so that they can deploy. And I'll quote Jeff Hancher. He's a business coach, and he's one of our first, once we rebooted the channel. He makes deposits in people. And this is one of the things I believe in, is making deposits in your team members and giving them the ability to skill up on, the things that are going to be transformative and impactful to business, which makes them impactful to the organization, impactful to the team, and gets them exposure to all this cool stuff. So they can say, hey, guess what I did? I did an IoT project in Italy. So I've kind of realigned how I do it, but in the past, it would be easy for me, as we call it, spitting fire and going up there and whiteboarding this great solution. But then there's that execution. And I believe, I use this phrase, it's kind of trite, but I'll say it anyways. I call it pristine delivery. And that doesn't necessarily mean that everything's got to be like the most perfect thing ever, because we're humans and technology gives us fit. But we want pristine delivery, being that the customer experience from beginning to end is a positive experience. And when we left them in a far better shape than we got them, or we've helped them to get out of a troublesome spot and they are happy with that. So I've kind of realigned myself a little bit to address that.
Yeah, that's great. Really good. I think the reality is when you're aggressive and you really want to help people and you're creative in your solutions, just like what you said, bringing your team along with you is really important. And also realizing that maybe that one time out of 20, you might overpromise a little, and then on the back end, you've got to figure out how to make it work and still do an awesome job. And that might
Yep.
mean some overtime and extra investment for the client. But the bottom line is you're going to get them what you promised.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. One of the focuses of, and you know this, our focus is technological outcomes and
Hmm.
repeatable results and building the team around it, be it the team that is delivering it or the customer's team. And if any one of those things don't work, the customer sat score is going to plummet. And
Right.
they're less apt to use you again. That's a reason why we pride ourselves on looking at the metric of again, I'll use a casual term, how little or actually no dumpster fires from the projects we've had, because we've strategically approached everything and we take the time to make sure that they are happy with the outcome. Um,
Right.
be it ideal or less than ideal, they will be smiling because they will get what they were promised.
That's
Um,
right.
yeah, it's not a challenge, it's a mindset. That's the way I look at it.
I agree.
For sure. So here's the next question, and I think I might have pre-shared this. So, tools for developing people, be it tools or processes. What is the best way that you either now or in the past have developed those who are in your charge? What is your approach to developing aspiring, no pun intended, aspiring consultants or those who are on your team that you want to develop and get more out of? What is your approach with that?
Well, I think you stole my thunder a bit, Michael, because I really like the concept that you brought it up about making deposits in people. And sometimes when you are a type A personality and you're pushing forward and you want to get things done, you think, oh, I just need to get this done. I can take care of it. I could also show someone else how to do it, but it's just going to take longer. It's going to take all my effort and it's really not going to help me that much. That's the wrong mindset of a leader. The right mindset is making that deposit. So if you think, yeah, it might take me a little bit longer if I help them through the process and let them do it and let them struggle a little bit and come back with questions and really invest in them. But long term, you're going to be much further ahead. That's why investing in people, in their leadership capabilities, in their technical capabilities is absolutely required if you want to have a successful company for the future. The other thing that I really like, over the years, I've done a lot of these, different types of assessments, whether it's, we use predictive index, or it's a DISC assessment, et cetera. Learning about yourself, learning about your blind spots, your strengths, your weaknesses are really, really important. So, for example, every assessment I've ever done, I come out very high in dominant, very high control, meaning I like to move quickly, I like to get things done, and I might not always listen to other people's ideas enough. So if you don't know that about yourself, you're not going to be in great shape for the long term. But by learning that, I can say very consciously, okay, pause for a moment, listen to other people's ideas first, truly work with them on them, evaluate them, and then go on and figure out where my own ideas fit in. I think the more you know your own self, the more you know your own DNA, you can more effectively lead teams. And I would say the concept goes to them. Learn your team, learn what drives them, learn what motivates them, and help them along that process.
Yeah, that's a great approach. That's a great approach. So you made me another synapse fire. This is real time again. I'll try to formulate the words properly here. So you mentioned the PI index, right? The PI.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
why? This is more of a question and maybe a thought provoking statement. There's been many of those that people have taken, and you're onboarded but when you're onboarded, you never see the results of that. I don't know if that's a legality thing or an HR issue, why that is. Do you think that would be beneficial that once somebody's on board, it's like, hey, by the way, here's the results of your PI.
Yeah.
And, that could be like the initial seeding of like, oh, this is how I'm perceived based upon this, and, focus on this or focus on that. Is
Yeah.
that ever a consideration with an
Yeah.
organization?
Absolutely. So I think most of those tools are designed to work like that. So there's ways you can learn about yourself, learn within teams, figure out how teams fit together. So it is really important. Strengths Finder is another one example where people do that, and then there's teams, and how do we fit together? We've done it with DISC, et cetera, internally. The challenge is keeping it going. Most people say, "Oh, I learned something. Wasn't that really great?" Which I think, no matter every one of them I've ever taken, I've learned something from. Um, but then you stop using it. So I think using it ongoing is a really great thing. Specifically with some of the assessments, though, they're not used in that way. They're meant to maybe in an interview process to help design which types of questions you should ask people, which roles they might be fit for, et cetera. So I think it depends on the specific use case, but the best case scenario is that yes, you do share it. Yes, you do help use the tools and assessments to help people forward, moving forward, and you use it for the long term.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of ties into some of the data nerdy stuff that I do is, I have the conversations, like I had one just a couple weeks ago, giving some CTO guidance to someone, and it was like the understanding that information is not knowledge, because information is not actionable. Knowledge is actionable, right? So you can take information, and then you look at it through whatever lens and filters you need to have to create an action item off of it. That whole assessment bit is like super actionable, and to your point, to have it keep going ongoing,
Mhm.
that would be incredible. I love it.
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
Touching on another area, so I'm going to circle back and I'm going to make a broad statement, and then I'm going to ask you a question. It's
All
kind of
right.
related to what I shared with you in advance. So we've touched on this from an aspirant in the approach. So I think the good tone is the people understand the integrated nature in which aspirant approaches projects, and lack of walls and barriers. But my question is, who came up with the goat and zombie videos?
That's funny. Yeah, so I had no idea you were going there. So we wanted a commercial. We wanted to do some commercials that really pointed out the difference between us and big consulting, which is we have very experienced teams. We give you real results, and as opposed to a lot of the stereotypes that are big consulting, such as they bring the teams in and everybody's right off the school bus, or they just give you this giant PowerPoint presentation instead of getting your real results. So we wanted to play off of those stereotypes, have a little fun with it. And we use ITI Advertising. They're a partner of ours on this. They came up with the campaign and produced the advertising, et cetera. So they did a great job. It won us a couple of Telly Awards, which we'll be posting about next week. We're going to get the actual awards, but really cool, really rewarding. I mean, maybe some people would say, well, not quite serious enough for consulting, but we try to be fun, and I think they got our point across.
I thought the lightness of it was what was more endearing. I mean, you can have those, other massive consulting companies, sitting around the conference room table and quick shots and cinematography and like, look at all these numbers. Or you can say, hey, to the point, here's our message. I liked it immensely. And I remember when you first shared the videos, actually, you sent them to me on a text link. And I literally laughed, like in a good way. I was like,
Good.
that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I'll put in the show notes. I'll put links so people can follow to it
Awesome.
if you haven't seen it already.
Yeah,
Um,
and actually, I don't want to get too far into advertising, but we are have just announced we are now the official consultant of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and there will be TV advertising, in-game advertising on the boards in their arena, et cetera, or on the big board in the arena before the game. So very excited to announce that.
Yeah, those who know me, well, if you're listening to the audio, I can't smile big enough because hockey and
Yeah,
soccer are my sports, right?
excellent,
So
excellent.
it's definitely a good relationship, and it's also a great organization. The Pittsburgh Penguins, they do so much for the community. They tend to treat their people with the utmost respect. At least from my experiences, it's been a wonderful organization. And really glad to be part of that family there. That's definitely awesome. Um, I know we're getting close to time, so I want to get one last viewpoint from you.
Okay.
And if 22 is coming up close, and normally we have the other show we do, the more technology show, we have a year-end show, and we call it the prediction show, and we talk about who we think what's going to happen with technology in the next year, and which companies are going to merge together, and we usually talk through all that stuff. Well, things are tossed on their head, and we're starting to get back to normal. And we know that, hybrid work is a thing. And we know that, collaboration is a thing. That's top of mind for businesses. From your network and from what your experiences have been in the past, we'll say this past year, is there going to be a shift in focus in 22 from a business perspective? Do you think there's going to be a concentration beyond or do you think it's going to be more the same as more organizations start to settle down? What are you seeing from a business perspective?
I do think it's going to be more of the same and potentially even more so. I think we're talking for the next year to year and a half that's going to continue. As I mentioned earlier, I think everybody's been impacted by the push to the virtual environment. That push, that change could have happened 5 years ago, or maybe even more. The technology was really pretty close to being ready to making that happen. The reality is, senior executives did not trust that. Oh, if people aren't in the office, if they're not in the seat, then they might not be doing the work. What they found out is people are actually been in general, I mean, there's big challenges with it, but people have been more productive, or at least as productive in the remote environment. So two things have happened. From a corporate financial standpoint, CFOs have said, well, I used to have 50 floors downtown in a big office building. Do I really need that? And if I cut that to 10 floors, how much capital can that free up for other investment? And at the same time, people who are working at these corporations say, I never want to go work at a downtown office 5 days a week ever again. So those two forces coming together means the world has changed. And it's changed for, whether a company, as I mentioned before, is now doing great and above how they could have ever expected to perform, or they're challenged by the environment, or they're just trying to get to the cloud, or they're trying to change their organization to be fit for purpose. All of that's going on, and on top of it, trying to find the right talent. And we have a practice around talent strategy and acquisition that we integrated this year as well. And we're seeing the biggest demand of any practice right now is in that talent organization. That was my view. And now, as we see what's starting to happen with the vaccine, with government mandates, with companies mandates, it may mean some people who are working at certain companies may or may not work there anymore. They may want to move. They may want to make changes. The environment is undergoing a huge transition. I think it's even going to get bigger. And what that means is everybody needs to, if you're a really good consultant, you need to be prepared. You need to be flexible to support this changing economy.
Yeah, dig your heels in because you're going to be busy, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
It's a good thing, and the as I mentioned earlier, Jeff Hancher, he and I had a conversation where he is estimating around, I think the number was 40% turnover rate, either through attrition or through, like the items that you had mentioned. And if you think of how hard it is to staff, that's got to be a challenge, right? In companies that are open to having those remote workers are probably seeing a lot more success than, hey, relocate, while we're on the backside of a pandemic into a town you don't know of, to an environment you're not sure of. It just makes people want that calm. So yeah, I definitely can hear what you're saying there. And it's a path forward. And you mentioned talent, and I had a conversation with Shally from Shally's Alley, and he and I were talking about the challenges that staffers go through trying to get the right type of talent. And there's you got to leverage technology the best you can, and you have to have an organization that is enticing enough for people to get there. So it's good to see that they are definitely making hay, as we would say.
Yeah, I agree. And to the point that you were just talking about, I think the companies that realize they need to change their hiring practice and hire virtually and open their search are going to have access to much greater talent. The companies that say, no, it's coming back, I want to just hire the way I used to, they're going to change. They're just going to be dragged into change over the next few years. But one way or the other, whether you embrace it and go for it, or you are led into it or pushed into it, you're going to change.
Yeah, change is inevitable, and this massive evolution is and you brought it up a couple times. The cloud adoption is a hockey stick if you were to chart it. We went from like 30 to 70 million people on Teams to now over 260 some million people just communicating on Microsoft Teams, and it's not going away. It's here to stay. So embrace it, our friends. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. I know your day is very busy. So I appreciate you taking some time to talk with us. I hope you'll come back and maybe we can have an ITPro talk and pick a topic and just tear it apart if you're up for it.
Absolutely. Would love to. Maybe goats and zombies, Mike.
There we go. As always, if you're listening, we appreciate you as listeners. If you're watching, since we're now putting things out on video, we obviously appreciate you watching us. We will put links in the show notes. If you are not watching, we put Aspirant, www.aspirant.com. Mike McClaine, the CEO of Aspirant, with us today. So I will put links to Mike's. Is it okay to put your link to your LinkedIn? You good with that?
Yeah. Oh, of course.
We'll put your LinkedIn, and we'll put some links to Aspirant, as well as I will also, since I brought it up, I'll hot link Dean Campbell. He can ride your coattails on this one. So we'll link him in there. Total fun fact. I was looking at Erica, Dean, and I told Dean today on a call, I was like, we'll see if the first week listeners that you get will eclipse Dean's first week listeners. He nudged Erica out a little bit. So we'll see if you can smash his 1 week record. Again, thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. And Mike, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it too. It was great talking to you.
Alrighty.